In Asgard, dark clouds gathered over the majestic palace, reflecting the fear that permeated the hearts of the gods. Odin, with his deep and troubled gaze, called for an assembly. One by one, the gods gathered in the central hall, where the firelight danced on the cold stone walls. The tension was palpable. The wolf grows in strength and hatred. Odin began, his voice sounding like distant thunder.
Fenrir is no longer a mere myth, but a real threat.
If we do not act, he will destroy everything we know. Tyr, the god of war, raised his hand, his expression serious.
We must gather our forces and find a way to contain him.
What he desires is not only freedom, but also the destruction of our order. Loki, leaning against a column with a cunning smile on his lips, interrupted. But imprisonment is a form of freedom, is it not? If we bind him, perhaps we can control him before he becomes uncontrollable. The gods exchanged glances, hesitant.
Loki's idea had a certain appeal, but distrust lingered in the air. Odin took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on Loki.
Do you truly believe we can imprison such a powerful being without consequences? Consequences? What is that compared to what he could do?
Loki replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. We must act now, before it is too late. The meeting took a dark turn as each god pondered Loki's words. Odin finally nodded.
If we decide to follow this path, we must be prepared for what may come next. Fenrir is cunning, and he will not be easily bound. Meanwhile, in a distant place, in the realm of giants, Fenrir watched the cloudy sky.
He felt the tension in the air, the growing fear of the gods. With a low and threatening growl, he rose, his eyes shining with a contained fury.
They fear me, he murmured to himself, his heart pounding with the adrenaline of the impending battle.
If they try to bind me, they will face the wrath of the wolf. With this, he prepared for what was to come, sensing that his freedom was at stake. Fenrir knew the gods would gather, and he was ready for anyone who dared to attempt to imprison him.
The gods convened in a sacred clearing, where the air was thick with tension and anticipation. Odin, with his penetrating and deep gaze, observed the chains forged by the gods. Drummond, a robust chain, seemed made of eternal steel, while Ringhorni, more delicate, shimmered in the sunlight as if it were alive. The urgency of the situation weighed heavily on them, and they all knew that only a successful binding of Fenrir could restore order.
Tyr, do you believe these chains will be sufficient?
Thor inquired, his hammer Mjolnir firm in his hand. The god of war, Tyr, looked at the chains with determination.
If we cannot succeed now, we may need to resort to something more. But we must try. The gods made their way to the world of giants, where Fenrir stood, defiant and imposing. Upon seeing them, the wolf lifted his head and laughed, a deep and threatening sound that reverberated through the forest. What brings the gods to me? Have you come to hunt me, or merely for amusement? We have come to challenge you. Fenrir, Odin replied, his voice echoing with authority. If you can break these chains, you will be free. But if you fail, you will become our prisoner. Fenrir tilted his head, amused.
An interesting proposal. Very well, I accept the challenge. He advanced, the ground trembling beneath his massive paws. The gods placed the chains around the wolf, who looked at them with disdain. With an agile and powerful motion, Fenrir twisted, and in an instant, the chains were shattered as if they were made of paper. The wolf's laughter echoed, and his eyes shone with a mix of triumph and challenge. Is this all you have?
The gods are weaker than I thought.
Fenrir mocked, causing the gods to exchange worried glances. The strength of the wolf exceeded their expectation, and fear began to seep among them. We need a more powerful solution, Loki said, watching the scene with a mischievous smile.
The dwarves are known for their skills. Perhaps they can help us. Then let's go.
We don't have time to lose, Odin commanded, the gravity of the situation becoming increasingly evident. The gods set off in search of the dwarves, determined to forge a weapon that could finally contain Fenrir and prevent his fury from becoming a catastrophe for all realms. The shadow of the wolf followed them, and the tension between the gods and Fenrir was far from resolved.
The dwarves, with their calloused hands and faces illuminated by the glow of the forges, worked tirelessly to create Gleipnir.
The rope, as fine as a hair but immensely strong, was made from impossible ingredients: the sound of a cat's paw, a woman's beard, the roots of a mountain, and the breath of a fish. When the masterpiece was finally presented, the gods gathered in Odin's hall, the tension in the air almost palpable.
This is our only hope, Odin said with a grave voice, as he watched Gleipnir shine under the light of the room.
If Fenrir does not yield, we will have to use force.
But we cannot underestimate his cunning. Tyr, always the bravest among the gods, spoke firmly. We must earn his trust. Fenrir will not be easily captured.
He needs to believe we are sincere. And how do we intend to convince him? Lorne inquired, his provocative tone revealing a slight grin. He trusts none of us, especially not you, Tyr. We need to offer a challenge, Tyr replied with determination.
A fair challenge, where he feels in control. Once he accepts, we can use Gleipnir without resistance. The gods discussed the plan, and soon decided that Tyr and Odin would approach Fenrir, armed with words and a magical rope. When they arrived at the place where Fenrir usually roamed, the wolf stood majestic, his eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and distrust.
Fenrir, called Odin, his voice echoing through the vastness.
We come in peace, not to fight, but to propose a challenge. A challenge?
Fenrir growled, his deep voice resonating. And what could you gods offer that I cannot refuse?
Tyr, seizing the opportunity, stepped forward.
A test of strength, Fenrir. If you can free yourself from Gleipnir, I will be your ally. If you fail, you will accept being bound in exchange for my word of honor. Fenrir tilted his head, weighing each word. And why should I trust you, Tyr?
You gods are known for your betrayals, because I am willing to risk my life, Tyr replied, sincerity in his gaze.
But you must also risk your freedom.
It's a fair game, don't you think?
Fair, Fenrir pondered, his eyes narrowing in consideration. Very well, I accept.
But know that betrayal will be met with fury.
With a nod, Odin and Tyr prepared to execute the plan, aware that the fate of the gods and Fenrir was about to be decided in a single test of strength.
The air was thick with tension as Fenrir looked at the gathered gods before him.
The wolf's eyes were like burning coals, reflecting both distrust and curiosity. He tilted his head, his claws digging into the ground, and challenged, if you truly wish to bind me, then give me proof.
One of you must place their hand in my mouth.
That way, we will know there will be no betrayal. The gods exchanged nervous glances, each contemplating what was at stake. Silence stretched until Tyr, the god of war, stepped forward. Bravery was etched on his face, but there was also a shadow of sadness in his eyes. I will do it, he said firmly.
If that's what we need to ensure peace, then let it be. You are a fool, Tyr,
exclaimed one of the other gods. This may cost you your life, or all of ours if we hesitate, Tyr replied, disregarding the warnings.
With determination, he approached Fenrir, who watched with a subtle smile, as if amused by the god's bravery.
Tyr slowly extended his hand, placing it in the wolf's mouth, an act often viewed as suicidal. Trust me, Fenrir, I do not wish for your death, but rather peace between our worlds. As the other gods quickly moved, binding Gleipnir around the wolf's body, Fenrir sensed the trap.
A roar of fury escaped his throat, and he tried to break free, but the magical rope was stronger than he had imagined.
Traitors, you will not escape unscathed. I will have my revenge. The threat echoed in the air, filling the space with palpable terror.
Tyr, seeing his hand being crushed by the wolf's strength, shouted, Fenrir, listen.
This is not our desire. We only wish to avoid a greater conflict. The wolf, struggling with rage and pain in his eyes, roared, You have bound me, Tyr.
Your trust was a fatal mistake. One day, you and your gods will pay for this. Tyr's determination did not waver, even in the face of pain. He knew the sacrifice he made was heavy, but he believed Fenrir's true intentions could still be understood.
The wolf, meanwhile, fought against the chains, a storm of emotions crossing his face as the rope consumed his freedom. The scene was a mix of bravery and despair, a moment that would forever change the fate of gods and giants.
Trapped in a dark cave, Fenrir roared with a fury that made the earth tremble. His claws, once free to run through the vast forests of Midgard, now scraped against the rocky walls, echoing his cries of rage. Darkness enveloped him, but his wild essence could not be contained.
Cursed gods, one day you will pay for this, he shouted, his voice reverberating through the abyss. The memory of Tyr's betrayal burned in his heart, fueling his rage. Outside, the gods gathered in a grand hall in Asgard, their faces marked by celebration, though a shadow of concern lingered over them. Odin, with his usual wisdom, observed the festivities with a serious expression.
The imprisonment of Fenrir is a victory, but we must not be deceived by momentary relief, he warned, his deep voice echoing in the hall.
The wolf may be contained, but his fury will only grow. Tyr, who had sacrificed his hand to bind the wolf, remained silent, contemplating the repercussion of his action. What we've done may cost us much more than we imagine, he murmured, drawing Odin's attention. The giants will not remain idle while Fenrir suffers. They will surely mobilize.
With each word spoken, the tension mounted.
Thor, known for his temper, stood up. Then let them come. What can the giants do against us?
We are ready to face them,
he shouted, pounding his fist on the table. But Odin shook his head, concern etched in his eyes. Brute force will not resolve what we have created.
Fenrir's imprisonment may be the spark for a war we cannot win. He looked at the other gods, each reflecting on the gravity of the situation. News of Fenrir's imprisonment spread quickly among the giants, causing an uproar in the icy lands surrounding Jotunheim.
Led by their fierce leaders, the giants began to mobilize, determined to avenge the wolf. The wind carried their cries of indignation, and the earth trembled beneath their heavy steps. Now is the time to act. We must prepare, said a dark-skinned giant, raising his axe in a gesture of defiance.
His voice resonated with the determination of an army on the march.
Meanwhile, in Asgard, Odin looked out the window of the Grand Hall, his thoughts heavy. If the giants advance, war will be inevitable. We need to find a solution before it is too late. The tension grew, a portent that their actions could unleash consequences far beyond what any of the gods could foresee. The storm raged like a solitary demon, its heavy clouds carrying the fury of the approaching giants toward Asgard.
Lightning sliced through the sky, illuminating the chaotic scene unfolding under the watchful eyes of the gods.
The giants, in a deafening clamor, demanded the freedom of Fenrir, and their invasion seemed like an unstoppable wave. Odin, wielding Gungnir, watched the enemies approach, concern etched on his face.
We must defend Asgard with all our strength,
Thor bellowed, raising his hammer, Mjolnir.
They have no idea what they are about to face. Be careful, Thor, Loki warned, a sly smile on his lips. The fury of the giants is like a tempest. Do not underestimate their power. The battle erupted with a thunderous roar, the gods facing the giants in a fierce struggle, while the storm's roar echoed in the background. Tyr, even without his hand, charged into the battlefield, determined to confront Fenrir.
The beams of light that erupted from the clash between the two worlds illuminated his path, but his mind was filled with conflict. Fenrir, Tyr shouted, the pain of loss and determination in his words. If you truly seek freedom, fight by my side. The scene intensified as Fenrir, finally free from his chains, emerged from the cave that had imprisoned him.
His fiery eyes met Tyr's, and an ironic smile formed on his lips.
You need not fear me, Tyr. I did not come merely for revenge.
I came to restore balance. The gods paused, perplexed, as Tyr faced Fenrir, not as an enemy, but as a potential ally.
You are not just a monster, Tyr declared, his voice firm. You are a guardian of freedom, indeed. Fenrir responded, sincerity echoing in his voice amid the clamor of battle. The gods fear me, but I am more than that. I seek a new path, where gods and giants can coexist. The fight around them seemed to diminish, combatants on both sides hesitating in light of the revelation. Tyr, still empowered by his sacrifice, extended his hand to Fenrir.
Then let us fight together, for a future where we can all live in peace. The gods and giants, now paralyzed by understanding, watched as Fenrir and Tyr united, a new alliance born from the ashes of conflict. A new era was about to begin, where the fury of the wolf and the bravery of the god of war would become the foundation for lasting understanding.